chainers, wherever you are in the world. This is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Thoughts and Coffee. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, as well as the host of the Blended Podcast and the founder of the Blended Pledge. And we've got quite the show for you today. Now, we've got Dave Sanderson. He was the last person on the plane during the Miracle of the Hudson. And what you probably don't know is that he worked in supply chain at the time. So we're going to hear all about his story. We're also going to be talking about how IKEA handles disruptions, supply chain disruptions. We're going to be talking about leadership, what's important to think about. Dave is going to walk us through that. And then we're also going to be talking about the new conveyor belt road in Japan. If you haven't heard about it, you're going to hear about it today. So we want to know where you're tuning in from. So let us know in the comments where you're tuning in from. If you have any questions for Dave, myself, we've got a really cool show for you today. All right. Let's get into what is happening at Let's Talk Supply Chain right now. I do want to mention our show sponsor, the Secret Society of Supply Chain. Now, we are relaunching this for 2025. If you're a part of it right now, stay tuned because we have so many amazing things coming your way. If you aren't a part of the Secret Society of Supply Chain, sign up for our newsletter so that you get to know which groups we're going to be launching and relaunching, what they're going to be looking like, how you can network, and so much more. So head over to secretsocietyofsupplychain.com. All right. So we've got a brand new episode. You all know that I have a Woman in Supply Chain series. We feature a woman on the podcast and the blog every single month. Now you're going to see quite a few of these from us gearing up towards the end of the year because we've got so many amazing women that we met at the Woman in Supply Chain Forum that's going to be featured in the series. So go check this one out. I had the pleasure of meeting Mercedes in person at the forum and got to learn more about her journey on the podcast. It's episode 437, and she shares with us what her journey has looked like and how she's been able to overcome some of the challenges in her journey and so much more. So head over to wherever you listen to the show and check that out. Now, a couple of things we've been doing on our LinkedIn, the Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn, is sharing some fun facts with you. Here is one of them. Shipping is more than moving goods. It's a trillion dollar powerhouse. And we talked to you a little bit about why that is. And then we did another one, supply chain areas with highest outsourcing. And we gave you a little bit of a graph so you can see what all of that means. And the source is Supply Chain Digest. So go and follow the Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn page. We're sharing these kind of tidbits and information all the time. We've got a weekly newsletter. We'd love to see you over there and be part of the community. Next, Manifest. The price is increasing or has already increased for Manifest 2025, February 10th through 12th. I'm going to be there in person. Make sure you go and register. I think there's going to be like something like 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 supply chain professionals at Manifest in February. So many people to talk to, so many people to meet. And I highly recommend that you go and check that out. We've got the registration link, I think, in the comments as well. Last but not least, I made an announcement yesterday that I signed a book deal to create a book in 2025. Well, actually, we're going to get started, I think, this week. Is it tomorrow? We're going to get started anyways. And it should be released in 2025. And I can't wait to share it with you. I've got the title already thought out. It's going to be more about my personal journey and so much more. So I can't wait to share that with you. But now it's time to bring up Dave to the show. Good morning, Dave. How are you?
Sarah, good morning. Thank you for having me today. It's very exciting.
It's so great to see you. Now, for anybody who's watching, we did not coordinate the pink for this morning. Dave came on and was like, I got an email last night. I was like, no, you didn't. I love the pink, though. It looks great on you.
My wife said the same thing, Sarah, so I got 2 thumbs up so far. We're good.
And I love the color pink. So, I mean, I was wearing it today and it just so happened we got to do that. So, we're totally coordinated from the get go. And we've got a really cool show for everybody. So, for anybody who doesn't know who you are, why don't you tell everybody who you are, what you do, where you're coming at us from? I think it's Charlotte. Anyways, let us know who you are and what you do.
Well, thank you very much. Yes, I am based in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've been here since 1984, so it's on and off, transferred around a lot. But been here primarily since 1984. I was in sales and sales technology for over 37 years, uh,
Wow.
and really it started out in the healthcare industry around materials management and finance, and sort of blossomed from there. So yeah, I've been in sales and sales technology, but as we're going to talk about, in 2009, things sort of changed in my life when I survived the plane crash known as the Miracle on the Hudson. That set me on a different direction. Even though I was still working in sales, I had a different mission. So now I have the opportunity not only to speak around the world, not only about my experience, but really about the lessons from that, and how to embrace uncertainty, because the
Hmm.
world is nothing but uncertain right now. And
Hmm.
just like a plane crash, you don't think you're going to ever be in a plane crash, as Sarah and I were talking about before we got on the show, and all of a sudden something happens. So we're going to talk about that. I also, I'm author of personal author of 3 books, co-authored one. So, like Sarah, congratulations on your book opportunity. It's going to be very exciting. It's a lot of work, I know that, but and our next book's coming out in 2026. I also publish a magazine, Sarah, called Moments Matter Magazine, where I highlight people's significant moment in their life and transition them to what they're doing right now, and why how everybody has that moment, how you too can take advantage of it and find opportunity out of it, and how to transform your life. So we do a lot of different things right now. We're very blessed, and through all that experiences I've had, I was also head of security for a guy named Tony Robbins for over 10 years. So I had the experience of being with Tony and serving him for over 10 years. So a little bit about
Amazing. Amazing. That is quite a journey. Now, I am very blessed as well because I get to talk to a lot of people, not only on this show, but on the podcast, on the Blended podcast, about their journeys, their perspectives, their stories, what makes them who they are. And it's just interesting to hear yours and how, for a brief moment in time and throughout your journey, you were in supply chain and then you were in security for Tony Robbins. And now you're writing books, you're speaking, you're motivating, uplifting, inspiring. And I just want to sort of point it out because there's a lot of the next generation that watches this and wants to learn from us, and it's really that you never know where life is going to take you, and you kind of want to make sure that you take advantage of opportunities and things like that, which you definitely have. And we're going to hear your story about Miracle on the Hudson in just a second. Let's get to the poll of the week. Now, we ask you all a question every single Wednesday morning, and we kind of wanted to have some fun with you last week. And so we asked you about your pets. Now, everybody loves pets. I mean, most people love pets, maybe not everybody. Some people have a cat, some people have a bearded dragon, some people have a dog, some people have all three, and maybe even more, including some chickens, things like that. We are not judging you for which pet. But the question we asked you, if you could ask your pet one question, what would it be? Now, 65% of you said, "Do you understand me?" 20% of you said, "What do you do all day?" 9% of you said, "Why do you mess up the floor?" And 7% said other. Now, Dave, do you have pets? Have you had pets? Was one of these questions, resonating with you, or?
Yeah, I mean, as soon as I saw it, I said, do you understand me? Because that's the one. Because Kenley, yeah, I talk. I love our dogs, and we got a female and a male, and I love both of them. But the female and I have a way we communicate, so that would be mine. Yeah.
I always say that the one yells at me when she wants something, when she's barking, and then the other one just talks to me all the time. But of course, I don't understand. But yes, I wish I could understand them.
Yep.
Bruce said, "Do you understand TV shows?" I've always wondered this because one of my dogs, Kona, she always sees dogs and barks at them on TV. But then our other dog, Kenzie, does not see them at all. So I think it varies per dog. Anyways, we had some really, really great comments for that question. And stay tuned because we're going to have some more fun with you over the next coming weeks, and ask you some fun questions that you can all get engaged with and, be part of the community conversation. All right, Dave, now's the time that I usually ask people for a market update, but you're not really in supply chain anymore. So I want to learn a little bit more about your story. What were you doing? What did it look like on that day? what happened with the Miracle on the Hudson?
Well, thank you very much, Sarah. I appreciate the opportunity. So, yeah, what's interesting, a little bit of background about that day is I was on the end of a 3-day business trip for a potential client based out of Sarasota, Florida. And the second day, we were actually working in a manufacturing plant because I was in consumer packaged goods. I was in
Mm.
charge of the Southeast for consumer packaged goods and primarily focused on finance, manufacturing, supply chain. That's where I lived. So this client had both manufacturing and supply chain. So we said the second day of that week, which was January 14th, in Petersburg, Virginia, working in a manufacturing. I'd seen how everything was coming together because the next day we were going to be working in a distribution center in Brooklyn, New York, where their distribution site was, understanding logistics, how things were moving, how the trucks were going in, how all the supplies, because they have all these different disparate supplies. So, we were actually, there for supply chain questions. We were looking at technology, how they could improve their whole supply chain through technology. That's what we were doing. And I
Mhm.
was working with a company by the name of Oracle. So I was looking at the entire perspective. And if anybody has never been in a distribution center, which I think a lot of people here probably have, they're open quite early in the morning. This one open up at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Whew.
So if you're gonna be in the game in supply chain, and this is something that goes back from all the way back to my first one when I was in healthcare materials management. You got to be there when all this stuff's happening. And
Nobody
all the
sleeps.
stuff starts happening in that world, in their consumer packaged goods world, is primarily meats and pickles and things like that. About 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. So we got there about 4:30, 5 o'clock, right when all the trucks and everything, all these things were happening. So we got to see the guts of it, how they were doing it, and how then we of course proposed how we're going to improve that process for them through technology. But when we start so early, you get done early. And I always plan my days because I travel a lot like you do. I always travel, always schedule the last flight, direct flight out. That was my strategy. I still do it today because you never know how the day's going to play out, right? You could be there
Mhm.
a long time. But
Right.
we got done early, so I called our travel agent at 10 o'clock that morning when we got done, and she put me on flight 1549, Miracle on the Hudson. I was
Mhm.
not scheduled to be on that flight. I was scheduled on the 5 o'clock flight. So I
Wow.
think I was supposed to be on that plane for a reason because there was no reason I should have even been on that flight. But I gave up a first class seat on at 5 o'clock for seat 15A on flight 1549 on January 15th.
Wow.
This thing's really it's amazing how this ties together. So I was back, I went back, I got there early. It was snowing, 11 degrees and snowing in New York, but that's no big deal, right? It's
It's
middle of
cold
winter.
though.
Yeah, but it's cold, but it's the planes were delayed, right? But that's no big deal, right? It happens all the time.
It does.
And I boarded, and Sarah, you and I were talking a little bit before. I didn't pay attention because I knew everything.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't know where the exits were. I didn't read that boarding card. I didn't do anything. I
First
went back and did
lesson,
what I always
be
did.
prepared, right?
Yeah,
First lesson, be prepared, listen to everything they say.
listen to everything they say, know where the exits are, and read the brochure. And I'll point that out in a second why that's important. But I didn't because I knew everything,
Mhm.
right? I went back
Right.
and started reading the magazine. Heads down, not talking to anybody. Let's get out of here. And so nothing extraordinary to take off. If you've been out of LaGuardia, right? You take off in the normal flight pattern out of LaGuardia is when they bear north and they start making their turns. No big deal until about a minute left into the plane flight, and all of a sudden you hear explosion. And I'd never heard an explosion like that on a plane. It was a loud boom.
Wow.
And so, it definitely got my attention because I never heard anything like that. And of course, now you're in New York City and hear a
Mhm.
boom. So, you're like, okay, what's going on? And I looked out the window and I saw fire coming out from beneath the left wing. So I knew something had happened, but I fly a lot. Planes have multiple engines.
Right.
But on this flight, which is one of the probably biggest extraordinary parts of this flight, what happened on the left side of the plane happened on the right side of the plane at the exact same second.
Wow.
That's why we only heard one boom.
Mm.
It was a double bird strike. At the exact same time. And I believe, and my belief system says, I think if we would have heard boom, boom,
Mhm.
then you got a different mindset. You're like, oh my gosh, this thing's blowing up, right?
Right.
But you hear one boom, it's like, okay, lost an engine, we're going back to the airport. We start banking. Okay, no big deal. Didn't really think about it until as we started banking, I looked out the window and all of a sudden the skyline of Manhattan was right out my window. I mean, I
Right.
could see the buildings, the top of the buildings. That's how low we were. And I'm like,
Wow.
I've never seen that perspective before. I've never seen that. Then
Mhm.
he started turning around, and All of a sudden, I looked out the window a little further. I see this bridge coming up. I said, I've never seen that. And that's when about 60 seconds later, you heard the captain say his famous words, "This is your captain. Brace for impact."
Mhm.
And now you know something's going on because that's like the command, right? If you hear something like that,
Yeah.
something's going on.
Right.
And that's when you gotta get your stuff together. I tell people, I think, I prayed, I got my wallet out, shoved it into my pants because I wanted to make sure someone knew who I was because all you saw out that window was water.
Wow.
And the only thing that I ever remember about water and planes is when they start tipping and start rolling over.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I thought this is it, game over, right? So I was
Mhm.
checking in with the big guy, right? I want to make sure I'm clean, right? Make sure I
Yeah.
got any forgiveness I need. Let's get it right now because we don't have much
Mhm.
time left. It was about 60 seconds after he crossed over the bridge. So when he crashed into the river. It was an extremely hard hit. He estimates he hit between 110 and 120 miles an hour.
Wow.
It was
I
that
didn't
hard of
realize
a hit.
that. I thought
No,
I thought he landed, like, a lot softer than that
no,
because
no.
mm,
It was a extremely hard hit, and especially on the backside. Because if you saw, I show a video of the plane landing, and when I speak, the backside hits first,
mhm.
then the front side slams down, then it starts skidding to
Mm.
the right about 100 yards. So
Wow.
the back end of the plane got basically torn off,
Mhm.
and that's why water started coming in so quickly.
And I think what happened was you were one of the first people to get to the front of the plane, but then something stopped you and you were like, "No, I wanna help people."
Yeah, because I played sports, and in sports, you always have a game plan, right? You go into a game plan, say what we're going to do. So my thought process, since I'm an athlete, is I got to have a game plan. My game plan was aisle up out.
Mm.
So I knew if I survived, I got to have a plan, and my plan was aisle up out. So I kept saying it in my head because that kept me focused instead of focusing on death, focusing on what if I survive? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
So so it was my time to get to the aisle. I got to the aisle very quickly, and that's when everything changed for me, Sarah, because that's when I heard my mother, who had passed away in 1997, say something in my head that she told me when I was a kid, and it was, "If you do the right thing, God will take care of you."
Mm.
And I grew up in a small town outside of Cincinnati, Ohio, where everybody took care of everybody who knew, and everybody knew everybody. So instead of going out the door, I went back of the plane to see if anybody needed help.
Mm.
And things were moving pretty quickly. But now you're at the back of the plane, and water was chest level deep,
Hmm.
and this is
Well
36-degree water.
and I think also being in supply chain, I have to bring supply chain back into this a little
Yep,
bit because as supply chain professionals, we're inherent problem solvers. It's
that's
kind
right.
of what we thrive on. It's what we like to do. It's kind of what we do every single day. And I would assume that that kind of also training would have helped you, how do
Oh
I
yeah,
solve this problem? What do I need to do?
yeah. Thank you for bringing that up because in my book Moments Matter, I talk about that. But in my world where I was in technology and manufacturing and supply chain, and one thing you learn in that world is how to assess risk quickly. Right?
Right.
You got to be able to assess risk, and the biggest
Mhm.
part of that is you got to assess it, but then you got to make a decision and go. Because
Mhm.
the world's moving too fast right now, right?
Yeah.
I mean, even back then, 15 years ago, things were moving quickly. So I
Mhm.
think one of the greatest benefits of being in the world that I was in is number one, I had to be able. I knew how to make a decision because that's what my parents taught me. But I could assess risk pretty quickly, and I could
Mm.
see where was the inherent risk. Where if I did this, how would it impact something else?
Mhm.
And I think, as I look back on that training that I had being with all these materials management, supply chain, logistics, manufacturing people, that's what they do every day.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
that's what
and
they
it's
do every day.
sorry to interrupt. It's interesting though, because a lot of supply chain professionals say to me, how do I help? How do I get involved? How do I use the skills that I've learned through my journey and my career in supply chain? And a lot of times you can actually just use the knowledge that you have to either help in a situation like we're talking about today, or you can go help an organization and volunteer for them and use the knowledge and, the risk mitigation skills, the problem solving that other maybe nonprofits need that you don't actually realize that you have and can help.
Yeah, I think that's a great distinction because the last several years have been nothing but uncertain and upheaval. And I've done a lot of work, and I'm going to tie this back because I've done a lot of work with the American Red Cross. I've helped them raise a
Mhm.
lot of money. But one thing of being around the Red Cross they do really well is logistics. They know supply chain because
Yeah.
when they have to go to a disaster, they've got to be able to mobilize quickly.
Yeah.
They've got to be able to get the supplies where their supplies are, get them situated, get logistics. I mean, it's amazing because I've been involved with a couple hurricanes in my last 15 years with the Red Cross, and seeing how they do that. I mean, that's what they live off of is supply chain and management. So what you just said is exactly accurate. If you have someone who's, well, how can I help? What can I else I can do? There are nonprofits that need that kind of support, that knowledge base,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And other people, small companies, especially need somebody to help them. And I'll even give you an example of that worked after the Miracle on the Hudson that really played into that. So this was during the pandemic, as we were talking about earlier, the pandemic. And I was in healthcare at that point in time in my technology world. So I was working supply chain healthcare. Okay.
Mhm.
All right. So, but here during the pandemic, all I'm doing is sitting here anyway, and I was basically making 5 phone calls days to check in, so I had some sanity, what was going on. But I talked to somebody, and I think I mentioned this to you, a finance director with a large hospital, and I called him up and I said, "Ruben, is there anything I can do to help?" He goes, "Yeah, I need mask."
Mm.
What? Yeah, I need mask. Sort of like flippant, right? Like I can help him with mask, right?
Right.
So hold on, I'll be back with you in a couple minutes. So I started making a couple phone calls to a couple people I knew who had connections with N95 mask.
Mhm.
And what we did at that point in time was I cooked him up with that person who hooked him up with somebody up in Indiana who was producing
Mm.
N95 mask. And all of a sudden, I could solve a challenge they were having because one of the things that came out during that time is a lot of supply chains were broken.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we learned, and I learned, and I used this in my sales career, when that was going on, and because I remember having a conversation with a CEO, a CFO, and a director of procurement. I was talking up and down the chain, right? So, and what's interesting, the CEO and CFO, Sarah, got it. We need masks. We need a lot of masks. Let's get them. Let's go. So I hooked them up, and then you get the director of procurement. Says, "Well, we need these 12 things documented and signed off on." And it's like, this is the Wild West, dude, right? If you don't take them, somebody else is going to get them. There's no
Right.
time to have 12 sign-offs right now, right? So
Yeah.
that was exposed a lot, especially in healthcare. I was talking to supply chain executives all across the country in hospitals who
Mhm.
needed the same thing, but their bureaucracy got in the way of being able to execute effectively.
Right, right. And so when sort of we talk about disruption all the time, but there's also the disruption around some of those events that you couldn't have predicted, like the pandemic, like what you went through. So this is a very different show because we're not going to go through any of the articles. What we will do is we're going to post the links to the articles that we were supposed to talk about because we've only got about 6 minutes left
Oh,
in the comments so everybody can go and check them out. There is a blog by Dave Sanderson talking about leadership and what he does for vets and sort of what the post Miracle on the Hudson looks like. But what I'd like to do is take the next 6 minutes and just finish out that story around the Miracle on the Hudson. So you're in the back, you're
yeah.
chest deep in water. What happens next?
So I get behind the last person and just keep going, right? And it was dark and everything. So I was going up. The first light that I saw was on the right side of the plane at 10F, like I am out of here. Time to go, baby, right?
Right,
But then I looked out the window and all of a sudden you see that little lifeboat was filled up and the wing was already filled up with people. There's no room for
right.
me. So that's why I was inside the plane for over 7 minutes, waist deep in 36-degree water.
36
And it was,
degrees.
it was
Oof.
about 6 or 7 minutes. Things were happening extremely quickly. You're in a situation like I called it with Katie Couric that night on CBS. It was controlled chaos
Yeah,
where no one's losing their heads, but things are moving so fast. You better keep up. I
right.
mean, we had a lady on the wing that wasn't moving. It's like, man, you got to move. I
Mhm.
mean, you can't be standing around looking for the next thing. I know she was in shock. So you got
Mhm.
to be able to get people. One of the skills I have is help people change their mindset, how they can change that
Right.
state. So I did that. But what happened about 6 minutes into this thing, Sarah, all of a sudden I felt the plane shift.
Mhm.
And what happened is one of the boats that was part of the rescue was a tugboat hit the front of
Right.
that plane, which shook the plane. And when it shook the plane, that's the first time I felt water going up my back.
Right.
Because all the water started. Now it's like, man, this thing's going down like Titanic. man, you got to get out of here. And
Mhm.
that's when I always thank my mom and dad, because if they hadn't given me swimming lessons when I was a kid, I may never get off that plane. I had
Mhm.
to swim for
Yeah.
my life.
And you were helping people get off the plane prior to that, right? Like, that was
Yeah,
kind of your main objective,
that
was
was
get
it.
everybody out? And I
Get
think
everybody out.
I think there is part of that story where you were the last person on there.
Last passenger off. Yeah, the captain was the last person off.
Okay.
I was the last passenger off the plane. Yeah, and that was shown on Good Morning America. When I was on Good Morning America, they showed that, how I was the
Very
last passenger off the plane. I was like, that's the first time I saw it. Like, wow. I was like overwhelmed when I saw that.
So what I guess, just to end sort
Yep.
of the show around what that has meant for you, what has that done for you in your career? You know, what have you done since then? I know you have a mission. The mission is use your experience to help others. And I think that that can resonate with so many people, supply chain leaders, supply chain professionals, because like you said, we're in sort of that disaster recovery all the time. There's disruption, we're mitigating risk, we're problem solving, we're trying to figure everything out. What sort of advice would you give to somebody? What did you learn? Why did you make it your mission, use your experience to help others?
Oh, thank you for asking, because that the article that you're posting about the how, sending the elevator back down,
Mhm.
that really is the essence. If you look at the essence of what I do is because one of the last things my mentor back in 1997 told me before he passed away was, "Do not let what I've taught you over 13 years die with you." And it
Mm.
was like, send that elevator back down, right? Give it back. And I think being in supply chain, finance, it doesn't matter in this world. You got to take your knowledge and pass it on to that next generation, because our supply chain professionals, they've learned a lot, but there's so many things that they can give back to help that next generation, even because disasters and disruption is not going to stop. It's
Mhm.
not going to stop. So I would just encourage everybody who's listening to this, who's in the world of supply chain, finance, manufacturing, whatever that world may be to you, is whatever you've got, find somebody and leave it with them. Give it back to them. That's sending the elevator back down. That's
Mm.
why that article is so. That was a very emotional article for me to write, because that was the last thing my mentor told me in 1997, and
Mm.
I'm fulfilling that promise right now. So if you ask what I do, Sarah, I'm fulfilling the promise I made in 1997 to send all this stuff back down and to educate as many people as I can. I'm taking 40 people next year on a mission to teach them
Wow.
everything, and I'm looking for 40 people right now who want to take that journey with me. So I'm very excited
Awesome.
about that opportunity to finally pay that off back to my mentor.
Awesome. Well, we've just posted the links to that article, Sending the Elevator Back Down. Highly recommend you go and check that out. One of the other articles that I wanted to talk about today is how Japan plans an automated cargo transport system to relieve the shortage of drivers and cut emissions. Go and check that article out. It's very interesting. They're calling it the conveyor belt road. So maybe sometime soon you can see packages going down the road as you're driving. Not sure, but that looks like it might be the future for us. Now, with Thanksgiving just a few days away, Dave, what are you thankful for? What are you grateful for?
Well, number one, just thankful that I'm above ground. I've always, every day above ground is a great day. But, I'm very blessed to have my family around still. And so I'm just thankful that everybody's healthy and we have
Mhm.
the opportunity just to be together, which, because all my kids are gone now. But this is the
Mhm.
one time a year where everybody starts to come back together. So thank you.
I love that. Well, I just want to wish everyone in our audience who's in the US, we want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving this week. Stay safe, have fun, have some family time, watch some football maybe if you're into football. And just want to wish you guys all a happy Thanksgiving. Dave, thank you so much for joining me today,
Thank you
sharing
very
your
much.
story and really showcasing what we as supply chain professionals really not only just bring to our day to day, but the impact that we have on a day to day and also the impact that we can have on the world. So I want to acknowledge and appreciate you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next week.